The first time I met Princess Lyris Vane, she was hiding under a diplomatic table. That alone should have told me my assignment was not going to follow protocol. I had arrived on Orith Prime as part of a human engineering delegation sent to repair a damaged orbital defense relay belonging to the Erethian crown. Officially, my task was technical: inspect relay failures, restore communications, and leave quietly before royal politics swallowed the mission. Unofficially, human delegations were always watched carefully because our species had developed a reputation for solving problems while accidentally creating 3 new ones. The royal palace itself looked like something carved from moonlight: towering silver arches, living crystal corridors, and walls that glowed faintly whenever someone passed. Everything felt too precise, too graceful, too silent. And then I heard a small voice whisper from beneath the conference table. "Do not tell them where I am." I stopped. At first, I thought the translator in my ear had malfunctioned. Then 2 bright silver eyes stared at me through folds of ceremonial fabric hanging from the edge of the table. A child. No, an alien child, perhaps 8 or 9 years old by appearance, though with species like this, age was impossible to guess. She wore a royal sash half dragging across the floor, and her pale hair had clearly escaped whatever formal arrangement palace attendants had attempted earlier. I glanced toward the chamber entrance where officials argued over schedules. Then back under the table. "I assume you belong somewhere important," I whispered. She narrowed her eyes. "I belong nowhere important if they cannot find me." That answer carried too much confidence for someone hiding beneath furniture. Fair point. Before I could say more, the chamber doors opened. 3 attendants entered in panic, and behind them came Queen Serenia Vale. Everything in the room changed the moment she entered. Tall, controlled, dressed in layered dark silver ceremonial robes lined with luminous thread, she moved with the kind of authority that required no raised voice. Her eyes swept the chamber once, and immediately stopped on me. Then she noticed the tiny hand gripping the underside of the tablecloth. A slow breath. "Lyris," she said. The child beneath the table sighed dramatically. I was not ready for mathematics. The queen closed her eyes for half a second as if summoning patience from another galaxy. Then the princess crawled out, stood beside me, and without warning, hid behind my leg. Every official in the room froze. The queen looked at me. I looked at the queen. No one had prepared me for becoming accidental cover during royal rebellion. My engineering assignment should have lasted 3 days. It became 10 because the orbital relay damage turned out worse than expected. Ancient atmospheric conductors had cracked under recent ion storms, and replacement systems required manual recalibration from upper station towers. That meant repeated palace access and repeated encounters with Princess Lyris. The second day, she appeared while I worked in a maintenance corridor, carrying a half-finished data tablet upside down. Why do humans fix things yourselves? Because broken things usually refuse to repair themselves. She considered that seriously. Palace technicians always ask permission first. That's why humans finish faster. That earned the first laugh I heard from her. A short, bright sound quickly hidden as if laughter itself might violate protocol. She began appearing whenever palace schedules allowed escape. Sometimes near relay rooms. Sometimes near gardens. Once inside an unused observatory where she asked impossible questions about Earth oceans and whether humans really built floating cities. At first, attendants tried stopping her. Eventually, they stopped trying when they realized she ignored everyone equally. Except me. That part became obvious faster than anyone expected. 3 days later, I found her sitting beside an inactive fountain in the inner garden, unusually quiet. No questions. No curiosity. Just silence. That worried me more than her energy ever had. What happened? She traced one finger, through dry stone patterns. They say I must begin formal succession behavior. That sounds serious. It means speaking carefully, sitting correctly, and never asking why adults lie politely. I sat beside her. That sounds exhausting. It is. For a while we watched light move through crystal leaves overhead. Then she asked quietly, "Did your people have parents who explained things?" The question landed heavier than expected. "Yes. Mine explains kingdoms," she said, meaning the queen, "but not fear." I looked at her. For the first time, the confidence had dropped enough to reveal what lived underneath. Loneliness shaped by responsibility far too early. Fear usually sounds smaller when spoken aloud, I said. She turned toward me. So if I speak it, it becomes weaker? Sometimes. A long pause. Then, I fear everyone already knows who I must become. There it was. Not childish fear. The fear of being watched before understanding yourself. So, I answered the only honest way possible. Then become difficult to predict. That earned another laugh. And perhaps something else. Trust. The palace noticed before I did. Because on the 6th day, during a formal relay inspection briefing, Princess Lyris ignored every attendant, crossed the chamber, and sat beside me while ministers discussed defense arrays. Not near me. Beside me. Close enough that her shoulder touched my arm. The chamber fell silent. One minister forgot what sentence he had been speaking. Queen Serenia, seated at the upper platform, did not visibly react, but her eyes sharpened slightly. The princess opened my engineering tablet. Upside down again. I understand none of this, she declared. Neither do most ministers, I said before thinking. Several officials inhaled sharply. The queen almost smiled. Almost. That nearly caused diplomatic collapse by itself. Later that evening I was summoned privately. The queen stood in a smaller chamber overlooking the lower city lights. No attendants. No court observers. Only silence and the faint sound of distant air traffic. You have become unexpectedly important to my daughter, she said. There are sentences with no safe response. This was one. I did not intend influence, Your Majesty. Intent rarely controls influence. Her gaze remained steady. Lyris trusts very few people. I noticed. She trusted her father. The sentence changed the room. Because past tense always carries weight. I waited. He died during border conflict 4 years ago, Serenia said calmly, though calm clearly cost effort. Since then, she studies every adult as if deciding who might leave next. That explained more than any protocol file had. She asks whether humans always answer directly, the queen added. I probably fail diplomacy often. That may be why she listens. The queen moved closer to the window. Tomorrow she enters ceremonial council presentation. She fears it. And you want me to encourage her? No, Serenia said quietly. I want you present. That surprised me enough that she noticed immediately. She asked for you specifically. The ceremony gathered nearly the entire upper court. Nobles, military leaders, council elders. Princess Lyris stood in formal silver attire at the center platform, visibly composed, but with hands clenched behind her back. The queen sat above. I stood where foreign advisors usually remained invisible. The child scanned the chamber once, then found me. Something in her posture eased. Questions began. Formal succession prompts requiring measured answers. Trade sectors. Defense ethics. Cultural obligations. She answered carefully, but halfway through an elder lord pressed harder. If the crown requires sacrifice before affection, which serves first? Too sharp a question for someone her age. The chamber waited. Lyris hesitated, then looked at me only briefly, and answered. Affection teaches why sacrifice matters. The chamber shifted. That answer had not come from memorized instruction. It came from understanding. Then, before anyone continued, she added with total innocence, "That is what fathers teach first." A pause. Then she pointed directly at me. The chamber stopped breathing. "He says fear becomes smaller when spoken aloud." Complete silence. Absolute, historic silence. Because the alien princess had just called a human father in front of the royal court. No minister moved for several seconds. Then whispers erupted everywhere at once. I considered whether diplomatic immunity covered spontaneous cultural catastrophe. Queen Serena raised one hand. Silence returned instantly. But not calm silence. Political silence. Dangerous silence. The queen looked at her daughter first, then at me. Her expression unreadable. "Princess Lyris," she said, "come here." The child obeyed immediately, perhaps realizing only now what she had done. The ceremony ended early. I expected removal from palace grounds by sunset. Instead, that night I received another summons. This time not to a chamber, to the Royal Observatory. The observatory ceiling showed the entire night sky through transparent shielding. Queen Serena stood alone beneath moving constellations. "She has not called anyone father since his death," she said before I spoke. I never encouraged that title. I know, that somehow sounded worse. The queen turned. For months, ministers proposed tutors, guardians, military mentors, noble families. She accepted none. "I'm just an engineer." "No," Serena said softly. "You are someone who did not speak to her like a future throne." The honesty in that sentence carried exhaustion hidden beneath royal discipline. Then she said the words I truly did not expect. "The court will interpret today politically unless I define it first." I waited carefully, which leaves only one stable path. Something about her tone made me immediately suspicious. What path? The queen met my eyes directly. Marriage. For perhaps 3 full seconds, I thought translation had failed. "I'm sorry." "To me," she clarified, as if that helped. It did not help. The court accepts guardianship only through blood, law, or crown union. If Lyris publicly names you family, factions will exploit ambiguity unless status becomes unchallengeable. I stared at her. "You are proposing marriage because your daughter trusts me?" "I am proposing political structure because my empire punishes emotional accidents." That is still the most alarming sentence I've heard this month. Unexpectedly, she laughed. Very quietly, but unmistakably real. The feeling is mutual. The next 2 days passed in negotiations so surreal I stopped questioning reality. Legal councils examined human Erythian union law. Diplomatic offices contacted Earth sectors discreetly. Half the court resisted. The other half realized refusing would openly wound the princess after her declaration. And Lyris herself? She accepted everything with suspicious ease. On the morning details were finalized, she sat beside me in the garden and asked, "Do humans usually look terrified before weddings?" "Only the intelligent ones." She nodded seriously. Mother also looked concerned. That's reassuring. Then she leaned against my arm. I said father because it felt true. No politics in her voice. No strategy. Only certainty. And suddenly the absurdity around us became something simpler. A child had reached for safety where she found it. Everything else followed because empires fear simple truths. The ceremony itself was smaller than expected, but no less historic. Court officials, military witnesses, foreign envoys, Queen Serena in formal silver-black attire bright enough to silence every whisper. When the vows ended, The chamber still looked stunned that history had bent around something no council predicted. Afterward, Princess Lyris crossed the hall, took one hand from each of us, and declared, "Now everyone may stop looking confused." For the first time that day, even ministers laughed. And in that moment, I understood the Queen's real reason for saying yes. Not merely politics, not merely stability, but because for the first time in years, her daughter looked entirely unafraid. Later that night, from the palace balcony, Serenia stood beside me watching city lights stretch below. "You still may regret accepting." "Probably," I admitted. A small smile touched her face. "So may I." But below us the palace no longer felt cold. Inside, a princess who had once hidden under tables now slept knowing someone she trusted remained. And across the empire, people still tried explaining how one human engineer came to repair a relay and somehow left as family to the crown.